The interrogation chamber aboard the Death Star. Princess Leia stands defiant. Darth Vader circles like a predator. But then he stops. Cold. Dead still. Something impossible just happened. As Vader probes her mind through the Force, he feels it. A connection that shouldn't exist. A Force signature that resonates with his own damaged soul in a way that can only mean one thing. This isn't just any rebel prisoner. This is his daughter. Everything changes in that instant. 20 years of believing his children died with Padme. Gone. The Empire's most wanted terrorist. His own flesh and blood. The woman he's about to torture for information. The daughter he never knew existed. What if this moment of recognition happened first? What if instead of Luke being the Skywalker child Vader discovered, it was Leia who triggered his journey back to the light? One moment, one realization. The entire Star Wars saga transformed. The torture droid hovers menacingly. Leia's eyes burn with defiance, but Vader's hand trembles as he reaches toward the control panel. Because how do you torture your own daughter? How do you serve an empire that would destroy the very thing you've spent decades believing was lost forever? This single moment of Force-induced recognition would rewrite galactic history. The Death Star interrogation becomes not about extracting rebel secrets, but about a father trying to reconnect with a daughter who sees him as the embodiment of evil. The political implications are staggering, the emotional consequences devastating, and the ripple effects? They would reshape everything we thought we knew about the fall of the Empire and the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. In the original timeline, Vader's discovery of his children came gradually and in reverse order. First Luke, whose name and incredible piloting skills during the Death Star assault triggered Vader's investigation. Then later, much later, the revelation about Leia came only after Luke had already begun turning his father back to the light. But what if that order was reversed? What if Vader's first glimpse into his lost family came through his daughter's fierce determination and unbreakable will? The moment of realization would be overwhelming. Vader, a man who has spent nearly 2 decades believing his children died with Padme, suddenly faced with the impossible truth. His daughter, alive, grown, and standing before him as a leader of the rebellion he's sworn to destroy. The conflicting emotions would be staggering. Joy at discovering his child lives, mixed with horror at what he's become and what he's done to the galaxy she fights to save. But Vader is not a man to be paralyzed by emotion, even one this profound. His tactical mind would immediately begin calculating the implications. This changes everything. Suddenly, the interrogation becomes not about extracting information through torture and fear, but about something far more complex. How does a father reconnect with a daughter he never knew existed, especially when that daughter sees him as the embodiment of everything evil in the galaxy? Vader's approach would shift dramatically. The torture droid would be dismissed. The threatening interrogation techniques would be set aside. Instead, Vader would find himself trying to reach out to Leia in ways he hasn't attempted with anyone since his fall to the dark side. He might remove his helmet, showing her his scarred face, trying to make her understand that beneath the machine is still a man, still her father. The revelation would be met with disbelief, then anger, then a desperate attempt by Leia to reject this impossible truth. But the Force doesn't lie. Even as Leia tries to deny it, she would feel the connection too. That strange familiarity she's always felt around matters of the Force. The way she could sometimes sense Luke's emotions across vast distances. The inexplicable strength that allows her to resist Imperial interrogation techniques that break most people. Suddenly, it all makes sense, and that understanding terrifies her more than any torture device ever could. The immediate consequences of this discovery would ripple outward like shockwaves. Vader's entire motivation structure would shift overnight. No longer is he simply the Emperor's enforcer, following orders without question. Now he has something to protect, something more important than his loyalty to his master. The question becomes, what is Darth Vader willing to do to keep his daughter safe? The answer, we can reasonably assume, is anything. This fundamental change in Vader's priorities would first manifest in his handling of the Death Star situation. In the original timeline, Vader allowed the interrogation to proceed with torture, permitted the destruction of Alderaan as a demonstration of Imperial power, and pursued the escaping rebels with ruthless efficiency. But with Leia as his daughter, every one of these decisions becomes complicated. The destruction of Alderaan presents the first major crisis. Grand Moff Tarkin orders the planet's annihilation to force Leia to reveal the location of the hidden rebel base. But now Vader knows this isn't just any prisoner they're threatening. This is his daughter, and they're about to destroy her adopted homeworld, murder her adoptive parents, and eliminate billions of innocent people right in front of her. The Vader who discovered Leia first simply cannot allow this to happen. But how does he stop it without revealing his discovery to Tarkin and, by extension, the Emperor? Vader would need to be subtle, manipulative in a way that protects both his daughter and his position. Perhaps he argues that Alderaan's destruction before they've extracted the information they need is premature and tactically unsound. Maybe he suggests that keeping Alderaan as leverage is more valuable than destroying it immediately. Or possibly, in a moment of barely controlled emotion, he uses the Force to sabotage the Death Star's targeting systems, making the shot miss its mark. The political implications of Alderaan's survival cannot be overstated. In the original timeline, its destruction served as the catalyzing moment that transformed the rebellion from a scattered resistance movement into a unified force for change. Billions of Imperial citizens who had been passive or even supportive of the Empire suddenly saw its true face. But if Alderaan survives, does the rebellion grow as quickly? Does it gain the moral authority that comes from being victims of genocide? Or does Vader's protection of his daughter inadvertently harm the cause she champions? These questions become even more complex when we consider Vader's next decision point, the arrival of the rescue mission. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca infiltrate the Death Star to rescue the princess, just as in the original timeline. But now Vader faces an impossible situation. These rebels have come to rescue his daughter, which serves his newfound paternal instincts perfectly. But they're also enemies of the Empire, and allowing them to succeed would be treason of the highest order. Vader's solution would likely involve a carefully orchestrated performance. He must appear to pursue and oppose the rescue mission while actually facilitating its success. Perhaps he deliberately misallocates stormtrooper resources, sending them to search areas where he knows the rebels aren't hiding. Maybe he subtly guides the group toward escape routes while making it appear that they discovered these paths through their own cleverness and skill. The trash compactor incident might be avoided entirely, or Vader might ensure that the compactor's systems malfunction at just the right moment to allow escape. Most intriguingly, this timeline presents us with the possibility of Vader's first meeting with Luke under completely different circumstances. Instead of their lightsaber duel being a confrontation between Jedi and Sith, master and student, it becomes a meeting between a father who has just discovered one child and the son he doesn't yet know exists. Luke's incredible Force potential would still be apparent to Vader, but now that discovery comes layered with the knowledge that he already has one child involved in the rebellion. The escape from the Death Star would succeed, but Vader's pursuit would be fundamentally different. Instead of trying to capture or destroy the fleeing rebels, he would be trying to protect his daughter while maintaining the appearance of Imperial loyalty. The tracking beacon placed on the Millennium Falcon might still serve its purpose of leading the Empire to the rebel base, but Vader's motivations for allowing this would be entirely different. He's not just following Imperial strategy, he's trying to stay close to his newfound daughter. The Battle of Yavin presents another crucial turning point. In the original timeline, Vader personally led the TIE fighter assault against the rebel fleet, nearly destroying the rebellion in its moment of triumph. But with Leia as his daughter, commanding the very base he's supposed to destroy, Vader faces an impossible choice. He cannot openly refuse to participate in the battle without revealing his treachery, but he also cannot allow the Death Star to succeed in its mission to destroy the rebel base and his daughter with it. Vader's solution would likely be both subtle and devastating to the Empire. Perhaps he would still participate in the fighter assault, but his tactics would be designed to fail. He might target non-essential systems on rebel ships, giving the appearance of aggression while ensuring the pilots survive. When Luke makes his trench run, Vader would recognize the boy's incredible Force potential, but his decision to pursue or protect him would be complicated by his knowledge that this attack might be the only way to save Leia. The destruction of the Death Star would still occur, but Vader's survival would be even more crucial now. He's no longer just a defeated Imperial commander. He's a father who has just watched his daughter's cause achieve its greatest victory while he was forced to fight against it. The psychological impact would be enormous, accelerating his journey away from the dark side at a pace that would concern the Emperor greatly. Emperor Palpatine's reaction to these events would be fascinating to observe. The master manipulator who orchestrated Anakin's fall would quickly sense changes in his apprentice's behavior and emotional state. Vader's newfound reluctance to pursue certain Imperial objectives, his subtle questioning of orders that might harm the rebellion, his increased interest in the Force-sensitive individuals within the Rebel Alliance. All of these changes would raise red flags for a Sith Lord who has maintained power through careful control of his subordinates. The Emperor's investigation into Vader's changed behavior might lead him to discover the truth about Leia's parentage independently. This creates a dangerous dynamic where both master and apprentice know about Vader's daughter, but neither knows that the other knows. Palpatine would likely see Leia as either a powerful tool to control Vader or a threat that must be eliminated. Vader, meanwhile, would be walking a constant tightrope, trying to protect his daughter without revealing the depth of his knowledge or feelings. This leads us to one of the most intriguing aspects of this alternate timeline: Leia's own journey with the Force. In the original saga, her training comes much later, after the fall of the Empire, when Luke finally reveals their family connection and begins teaching her. But with Vader knowing about her from the beginning, her Force education might begin much earlier and under very different circumstances. Vader's desire to connect with his daughter and protect her would likely drive him to find ways to enhance her abilities. He cannot openly approach her for training sessions, but he might find subtle ways to guide her development. Perhaps he arranges for certain Jedi artifacts to fall into Rebel hands, knowing that Leia's natural Force sensitivity will draw her to them. Maybe he manipulates events so that she faces challenges that will strengthen her abilities and test her resolve. The political implications of Leia's early Force development cannot be ignored. A Rebel leader who can actively use the Force becomes an entirely different kind of threat to the Empire. Her natural leadership abilities, combined with growing Jedi powers, would make her not just a political figurehead, but a genuine warrior mystic in the tradition of the Old Republic's greatest heroes. The rebellion would rally around her in ways that go beyond normal military loyalty, seeing in her the return of the Jedi as protectors of freedom. But this accelerated development also creates internal conflicts within Leia herself. Learning about her Force abilities means eventually learning about their source and the truth about Darth Vader being her father. Unlike Luke, who had time to process this revelation and see evidence of Vader's capacity for good, Leia's discovery comes while she's actively fighting against everything Vader represents. The psychological impact of learning that the man who has terrorized the galaxy, who destroyed her world and murdered countless innocents, is also her father, would be devastating. Yet Leia's character has always been defined by her strength in the face of impossible situations. Her reaction to this revelation would likely be different from Luke's. Where Luke sought to redeem his father, Leia might initially focus on proving that she is nothing like Vader, that genetics do not determine destiny. This could drive her to become even more committed to the rebellion's cause, more willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good, more determined to be everything that Vader is not. The dynamic between Leia and Luke in this timeline becomes incredibly complex. Their meeting on Tatooine and subsequent relationship would be built on entirely different foundations. Instead of being the naive farm boy who dreams of adventure, Luke encounters a rebel leader who already knows about her Force heritage and family connections. The traditional roles might be reversed, with Leia serving as Luke's introduction to both the Force and the larger galactic conflict. Their training together would be fascinating to explore. Two equally powerful Force users, each processing the revelation of their parentage in different ways, learning to work together while dealing with the enormous implications of their heritage. Luke's natural optimism and belief in redemption would clash with Leia's more pragmatic approach and deep anger toward their father. These conflicts would create a dynamic where each sibling pushes the other toward greater understanding and power. The search for additional Jedi training takes on new urgency in this timeline. With both Skywalker twins aware of their abilities and actively developing their powers, the need for proper instruction becomes critical. The journey to Dagobah to find Yoda might involve both siblings, creating a very different training dynamic. Yoda, who helped hide the twins in the first place, would need to adjust his teaching methods for two students with very different perspectives on the Force and their father. Yoda's reaction to this change in timeline would be particularly interesting. The ancient Jedi Master spent years planning Luke's training specifically, crafting lessons designed to help him become the Jedi who could redeem Vader and defeat the Emperor. But with Leia also in training, and with Vader's redemption potentially happening much faster, all of Yoda's careful plans would need to be reconsidered. The revelation about their parentage, when it comes, would hit Luke much harder in this timeline. Instead of being the first to learn about Vader being his father, Luke would discover that his sister has been carrying this knowledge alone. The guilt of not sharing this burden, combined with the shock of the revelation itself, might actually make Luke's emotional journey more difficult than in the original timeline. Meanwhile, Vader's own transformation would be accelerating beyond anything seen in the original saga. Knowing about Leia from the beginning gives him more time to process his emotions and more opportunities to demonstrate his growing conflict with the Empire's methods. Small acts of rebellion against Imperial policy, subtle assistance to rebel operations, increased questioning of the Emperor's orders. All of these changes would be building toward a much earlier confrontation between master and apprentice. The Empire Strikes Back era becomes particularly fascinating in this alternate timeline. The Battle of Hoth might proceed very differently, with Vader's assault being designed more to capture than destroy. His personal involvement in the ground assault could be motivated by a desire to see his daughter in person, to confirm her safety, perhaps even to attempt some form of contact. The famous "I love you" and "I know" exchange between Leia and Han might be overheard by Vader, adding another layer of complexity to his understanding of his daughter's life and relationships. The carbon freezing of Han Solo presents Vader with another moral dilemma. This man is clearly important to his daughter, someone she loves deeply. Does Vader allow this torture to proceed, or does he find ways to sabotage it? Perhaps the carbon freezing process is deliberately altered to ensure Han's survival. Or maybe Vader ensures that the carbonite slab is handled with unusual care during transport. Luke's training with Yoda becomes even more crucial in this timeline, as he's not just preparing to face Vader, but also processing the knowledge that his sister has been dealing with their father's identity for years. The lessons about fear, anger, and the dark side take on new meaning when Luke realizes that Leia has been managing these same emotions while actively leading a rebellion against their father. The Cloud City confrontation becomes the first real opportunity for all three family members to be in the same place at the same time. But instead of the shocking revelation about Luke's parentage being the climax, this meeting becomes about Vader's attempts to bring both his children into his plans for overthrowing the Emperor. The lightsaber duel might still occur, but its meaning is entirely different. Vader isn't trying to capture Luke to turn him to the dark side. He's trying to convince both his children that together, they can destroy the Sith and bring order to the galaxy. Luke's reaction to this proposal would be complicated by his knowledge that Leia has been struggling with these same choices for much longer. The decision to reject Vader's offer and leap into the abyss might be motivated not just by his own moral convictions, but by his desire to protect his sister from having to make an impossible choice between family and cause. The rescue of Luke after his fall presents interesting dynamics as well. Leia's Force connection to Luke, already strong in the original timeline, would be even more powerful here, enhanced by her earlier training and development. But her ability to guide the Millennium Falcon to Luke's rescue would be complicated by her knowledge that they're also moving closer to Vader, the father she's been running from. The period between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi becomes a time of intense preparation and internal conflict for all three family members. Vader continues his subtle rebellion against Imperial policy while maintaining the appearance of loyalty. Leia struggles with her growing Force abilities and her knowledge of their source. Luke processes the revelation about his father while preparing for what he knows will be an inevitable confrontation. The plan to rescue Han Solo from Jabba's palace might involve more direct use of the Force by Leia, who has had more time to develop her abilities. Her infiltration as Boushh could be enhanced by Force-assisted disguise techniques, making her infiltration more believable and effective. Luke's arrival and subsequent confrontation with Jabba might be supported by subtle Force assistance from his sister, creating a partnership that demonstrates their growing power as a team. The return to Dagobah for the completion of Luke's training takes on new significance, when Yoda's death removes one of the last links to the old Jedi Order. But instead of Luke being alone with this knowledge, he has his sister to help him process the loss and continue their joint development. Obi-Wan's final revelations about their parentage and Leia's true identity would be confirmations rather than shocking reveals, allowing the focus to shift to preparation for the final confrontation with the Emperor. The assault on the second Death Star becomes a family affair in ways the original timeline never allowed. Both Skywalker twins are now fully aware of their heritage and abilities. Both have spent years processing their relationship with Vader in different ways, and both are committed to ending the Empire's reign of terror, though they may disagree on what should be done about their father. The shield generator mission on Endor might involve both siblings, with Leia's diplomatic skills and Force abilities combining with Luke's growing Jedi powers to create a more effective strike team. The Ewok alliance could be forged more quickly and effectively with two Force-sensitive negotiators working together. Meanwhile, Vader's presence aboard the Death Star is complicated by his knowledge that both his children are involved in the assault against it. His ability to sense their presence through the Force makes it impossible for him to focus entirely on defending the station. Every tactical decision becomes a balance between his Imperial duties and his parental instincts. The throne room confrontation becomes the culmination of years of family dynamics rather than the shocking revelation scene it was in the original timeline. Luke's surrender to Imperial forces and his transport to the Death Star might be a jointly planned strategy with Leia rather than a desperate solo mission. The conversation between father and son on the shuttle to the Death Star would be entirely different, with Luke able to reference years of Vader's subtle assistance to the rebellion and his growing rejection of the Emperor's teachings. Emperor Palpatine's plans for the throne room encounter would need to be completely reconsidered in this timeline. Instead of playing father against son to turn Luke to the dark side, he would be dealing with two powerful Force users who have been preparing for this confrontation for years. His strategy would likely involve trying to turn the siblings against each other, perhaps by revealing information about Vader's actions during the years since discovering Leia's identity. The final lightsaber duel takes on entirely new meaning when it's not just Luke fighting his father, but potentially both siblings working together to redeem the man who gave them life, but also caused so much suffering in the galaxy. Vader's internal conflict would be even more intense, fighting against children who represent not just his past as Anakin Skywalker, but also his only hope for a future beyond the darkness of the Sith. The Emperor's ultimate defeat might come not from Luke's rejection of the dark side alone, but from the combined will of both Skywalker twins, united in their determination to save their father and end the Sith's reign. Vader's redemption and sacrifice would be motivated not just by his love for Luke, but by his years of watching Leia's strength and determination, his growing understanding of what the Empire has cost the galaxy, and his desire to finally become the father both his children deserve. The aftermath of the Emperor's defeat would see a galaxy where the New Republic is led by someone who has spent years developing both political acumen and Force abilities. Leia's role in the post-Imperial government would be enhanced by her reputation as one of the heroes who brought down the Sith. Luke's journey as a Jedi would continue, but now with his sister as a partner in rebuilding the Jedi Order and healing the galaxy. The impact on galactic society would be profound. Instead of the Jedi returning through the actions of a single untrained farm boy, their restoration would be led by two powerful Force users with very different but complementary perspectives. Leia's political experience combined with Luke's spiritual focus could create a new model for how Force users interact with galactic government, avoiding some of the pitfalls that led to the Old Republic's fall. This alternate timeline raises fascinating questions about destiny, choice, and the power of family connections. Would Vader's redemption have been more complete if it had more time to develop? Would the galaxy have been better served by having two trained Skywalkers leading its recovery? Would the Empire have fallen sooner if its most powerful enforcer had been secretly working against it for years? The ripple effects extend beyond just the main characters. Han Solo's relationship with Leia would develop under the knowledge of her true parentage and growing Force abilities. Their romance would be complicated by the revelation that her father is the man who froze him in carbonite and tortured him repeatedly. Yet it might also be strengthened by Han's ability to see past her heritage to the woman she chooses to be. Chewbacca's loyalty to the Skywalker family would take on new dimensions, as he would be protecting not just one Force-sensitive friend, but two. His warrior culture's respect for strength and honor would make him a natural ally in both siblings' development as Jedi. The droids, C-3PO and R2-D2, would have even more significant roles as witnesses to the family's reunion. R2-D2's knowledge of Anakin's history and Padmé's fate would make him a crucial link between the past and present for both twins. C-3PO's protocol programming would be constantly challenged by the unprecedented nature of negotiating between rebel leaders and Imperial officers who happened to be family members. Even minor characters would be affected by this change. Rebel pilots who served under Princess Leia's command would find themselves having fought alongside the daughter of Darth, Vader. Imperial officers who worked with Vader would eventually realize that their commander had been secretly protecting the very rebels they were fighting against. The political implications alone would reshape how the post-Imperial government deals with former Imperials, and collaboration, the broader themes of the Star Wars saga, would be enhanced by this alternate timeline. The power of family love over hatred becomes even more pronounced when Vader's redemption begins with his discovery of Leia rather than culminating with his sacrifice for Luke. The idea that no one is beyond redemption gains more weight when we see Vader's transformation happening gradually over years rather than in a single moment of crisis. The balance between destiny and choice becomes more complex when both Skywalker twins are making conscious decisions about their heritage from earlier ages. Leia's choice to remain committed to the light despite learning about her dark side heritage demonstrates that our actions matter more than our bloodline. Luke's journey becomes less about discovering his destiny and more about choosing how to fulfill it. Alongside his sister, this alternate timeline ultimately suggests that the galaxy's salvation didn't depend on Luke Skywalker alone, but on the combined strength of both children who inherited Anakin's potential but chose to use it differently than their father did. It shows us a Star Wars universe where family connections are discovered earlier, processed longer, and ultimately prove even more powerful in transforming both individuals and the galaxy they inhabit. The story becomes not just about a son saving his father, but about two children who refuse to abandon the man who gave them life, even when that man has become the galaxy's greatest villain. It's about the power of love to overcome hatred, the strength that comes from facing impossible truths together, and the hope that no one, no matter how far they have fallen, is beyond the reach of redemption when family refuses to give up on them. In this timeline, Princess Leia's legacy extends far beyond political leadership to encompass the restoration of the Jedi and the healing of her family. Luke's journey becomes one of supporting and learning from his sister, as much as discovering his own destiny. And Vader's redemption becomes not a last-minute conversion, but a gradual return to the light guided by the unwavering love and strength of both his children. This is the power of a single moment of recognition, a single instant where the Force reveals truth instead of hiding it. In discovering Leia first, Vader doesn't just find his daughter. He finds his way back to being the man Anakin Skywalker was always meant to become, with years instead of moments to make that transformation complete. The psychological transformation of Darth Vader in this alternate timeline cannot be understated. For nearly 2 decades, Vader has existed in a state of emotional numbness, his humanity buried beneath layers of mechanical life support and Sith conditioning. The discovery of Leia awakens feelings he thought were permanently destroyed on Mustafar. Suddenly, he remembers what it feels like to have something to protect that isn't connected to power or fear. The paternal instincts that Anakin felt for his unborn children, suppressed and forgotten, come flooding back with overwhelming intensity. This emotional awakening has profound effects on Vader's relationship with the Force itself. The dark side feeds on anger, hatred, and fear, but Vader's growing love for his daughter begins to create cracks in his Sith foundation. He finds himself questioning orders not out of tactical disagreement, but from moral objections he hasn't felt in decades. When Imperial intelligence suggests using biological weapons against rebel strongholds, Vader's immediate thought isn't about strategic effectiveness but about his daughter potentially being caught in such an attack. This shift in priorities creates internal conflicts that manifest as physical pain. As his cybernetic systems struggle to process emotional responses his body hasn't experienced since his transformation. The Emperor, being a master manipulator and student of the dark side, would notice these changes immediately. Palpatine's survival has always depended on his ability to read and control those around him, and Vader's altered behavior patterns would set off every alarm in the Sith Lord's tactical mind. The subtle changes in Vader's Force signature, his decreased aggression during missions, his newfound tendency to question orders that might harm civilian populations. All of these would signal to Palpatine that his apprentice has found something more important than his loyalty to the Sith. Palpatine's response would be characteristically manipulative and multi-layered. First, he would begin investigating what has caused this change in his apprentice, using the vast intelligence networks of the Empire to track Vader's movements and interactions. The discovery that Vader has been showing unusual interest in Princess Leia Organa would eventually lead the Emperor to the same conclusion about her parentage that Vader reached through the Force. But unlike Vader, Palpatine would see this revelation not as an opportunity for redemption, but as the ultimate tool for controlling his apprentice. The chess game between master and apprentice would become incredibly complex. Palpatine would begin maneuvering to place Leia in greater danger, not to harm her, but to force Vader into increasingly compromising positions. Missions that require Vader to choose between his Imperial duties and his daughter's safety would become more frequent and more obvious. The Emperor's goal would be to either drive Vader fully back to the dark side through the pain of being unable to protect his daughter, or to expose Vader's treachery and eliminate both him and Leia as threats to Sith rule. Vader, meanwhile, would be playing his own dangerous game. His growing skills at deception and misdirection, learned through years of Sith training, would be turned against his master. He would need to maintain the appearance of loyalty while actively working to undermine Imperial operations that threaten the rebellion in general and his daughter in particular. This double life would be incredibly taxing, requiring him to compartmentalize his emotions and actions in ways that create enormous psychological strain. The impact on Imperial military operations would be subtle but significant. Intelligence reports that might lead to successful raids on rebel bases would be delayed or misdirected. Equipment failures would become more common during anti-rebellion campaigns. Key Imperial officers who showed excessive enthusiasm for brutality against captured rebels would find their careers mysteriously stalled or ended. Vader's position as the Emperor's right hand gives him access to virtually every Imperial operation, and his growing commitment to protecting the rebellion creates countless opportunities for sabotage. But Vader's transformation isn't just about protecting his daughter, it's about rediscovering his own capacity for good. As he works to undermine the Empire from within, he begins to remember why he originally wanted to bring order to the galaxy. The young Anakin's desire to help people, to free slaves, to protect the innocent, starts to resurface. He finds himself questioning not just orders that might harm Leia, but the entire Imperial system that creates suffering on a galactic scale. This philosophical awakening creates a fascinating dynamic in Vader's relationship with the rebellion itself. He cannot openly support their cause without exposing his treachery, but he begins to respect their dedication and sacrifice in ways he never did before. When he reviews intelligence reports about rebel operations, he starts to see not terrorist activities, but legitimate resistance to tyranny. When he observes the dedication of rebel prisoners under interrogation, he begins to understand the principles that drive people to risk everything for freedom. The gradual nature of this transformation makes it more psychologically realistic than the sudden redemption we see in the original trilogy. Real change, especially change that involves overcoming decades of conditioning and trauma, happens slowly and with many setbacks. Vader would have moments of doubt, times when the dark side pulls him back toward his old patterns of thinking and acting. The internal struggle between Anakin and Vader would be ongoing and intense, playing out over years rather than hours. These internal conflicts would manifest in ways that affect everyone around Vader. Imperial officers serving under him would notice his changing leadership style, his decreased use of force choking as a disciplinary tool, his growing tendency to accept tactical suggestions from subordinates rather than demanding absolute obedience. Some would see this as weakness and attempt to exploit it, only to discover that Vader's capacity for violence hasn't disappeared, merely become more selective in its application. The rebellion's intelligence networks would also begin to notice patterns suggesting that Imperial operations against them are being somehow compromised from within. Missions that should have succeeded based on Imperial capabilities and intelligence are failing at suspiciously high rates. Key rebel leaders are escaping capture by impossibly narrow margins. Supply convoys are reaching rebel bases despite Imperial interdiction efforts. Eventually, rebel intelligence analysts would be forced to conclude that someone very highly placed in the Imperial hierarchy is secretly working in their favor. This creates a fascinating intelligence warfare dynamic where both sides are trying to identify and protect or eliminate a double agent whose identity is known to neither. The rebellion wants to protect their mysterious Imperial ally while trying to discover who they are so they can coordinate more effectively. The Empire wants to find and eliminate the traitor who is undermining their operations. Meanwhile, Vader is trying to help the rebellion without being discovered by either side. A triple game that requires incredible skill and constant vigilance. Leia's own development during this period becomes even more complex and interesting. Her natural Force sensitivity, now acknowledged and beginning to be trained, would give her insights into the galactic conflict that pure political analysis could never provide. She would begin to sense the emotional states and intentions of people around her, making her an even more effective leader and negotiator. Her ability to detect deception would make Imperial infiltration of the rebellion much more difficult, while her empathic abilities would help her understand and motivate the diverse coalition of beings fighting against Imperial rule. But Leia's Force development would also create new challenges and responsibilities. As her abilities grow, she would begin to sense the broader emotional landscape of the galactic civil war. The pain and suffering of billions of beings under Imperial rule would become not just abstract knowledge but felt experience. The weight of this empathic burden would drive her to push for more aggressive rebellion strategies, creating tension with more cautious rebel leaders who prefer gradual, sustainable resistance to quick, decisive action. Her relationship with her adoptive father, Bail Organa, would evolve as her true heritage becomes known within the rebel leadership. Bail's knowledge of her parentage, kept secret for so many years, would finally be revealed as her Force abilities make concealment impossible. The conversations between adoptive father and Force-sensitive daughter would be emotionally intense, touching on themes of identity, belonging, and the weight of legacy that would reshape Leia's understanding of herself and her place in the galaxy. The impact on Rebel Alliance strategy would be profound. Having a Force-sensitive leader changes the nature of the organization from a purely military and political resistance movement to something approaching the Jedi-led armies of the Clone Wars. Leia's growing abilities would make her a target for Imperial assassination attempts, but also a symbol of hope for Force-sensitive beings throughout the galaxy who have been hiding their abilities since the Jedi Purge. The search for surviving Jedi and Force-sensitive individuals would become a priority for the rebellion, not just to recruit allies, but to help train and guide Leia's development. This would lead to earlier contact with figures like Ahsoka Tano, who could provide crucial training and historical context for both Leia and eventually Luke. The discovery of other survivors of Order 66 would add experienced warriors and advisors to the rebellion while also creating opportunities for Vader to confront his role in the destruction of the Jedi Order. Luke's eventual entry into this altered timeline would create a fascinating dynamic between the twins. Instead of being the naive farm boy who stumbles into galactic adventure, Luke would encounter a rebellion already partially led by a trained Force user who happens to be his sister. His initial role might be more as a student than a leader, learning from Leia's political experience and early Force training while contributing his own unique perspective and abilities. The revelation of their twin connection would have different implications in this timeline. Rather than being a shocking discovery that recontextualizes their relationship, it would explain the strong Force bond they've always shared and provide a foundation for joint training and development. Their combined Force potential would make them an incredibly powerful team, capable of achievements that neither could accomplish alone. Their different approaches to the Force would complement each other perfectly. Leia's training, shaped by years of political leadership and moral certainty about right and wrong, would tend toward the more militant aspects of Force use. Her abilities would be focused on protection, influence, and the kind of battlefield applications that make her an effective military commander. Luke's more contemplative nature and spiritual inclination would lead him toward the healing and wisdom aspects of Jedi training, making him the perfect counterbalance to his sister's more aggressive approach. The joint training of both siblings would require finding instructors capable of teaching two equally powerful but differently motivated students. Yoda's role would be expanded and complicated, as he would need to develop training programs for both the future Jedi Knight and the current rebel leader. His teachings about the dangers of attachment and the importance of letting go would be particularly challenging for both twins. as their family connections are both their greatest strength and their greatest potential weakness. The question of what to do about their father would become a central tension in their relationship. Luke's natural inclination toward forgiveness and redemption would conflict with Leia's more practical concerns about justice and responsibility. She has seen firsthand the damage that Darth Vader has done to the galaxy, has lost friends and allies to his actions, and has spent years fighting against everything he represents. The idea that he might be redeemable would be much harder for her to accept than it was for Luke in the original timeline. This philosophical difference between the siblings would create ongoing debates about strategy, ethics, and the ultimate goals of their resistance movement. Luke would argue for finding ways to reach their father and guide him back to the light, while Leia would insist that their primary responsibility is to the billions of beings suffering under Imperial rule, regardless of their personal family connections. These debates would force both characters to refine and defend their moral positions, leading to stronger and more nuanced ethical frameworks for their eventual roles as leaders of the new galactic order. The romantic relationships of both twins would be affected by their altered circumstances. Leia's relationship with Han Solo would develop under the knowledge of her Force abilities and family heritage, creating additional layers of complexity to their already complicated dynamic. Han's cynical, pragmatic worldview would be constantly challenged by his lover's growing mystical abilities and moral certainties. His protective instincts would be activated not just by her political importance, but by her role as one of the galaxy's most powerful Force users. Han's relationship with Vader would be particularly interesting in this timeline. Instead of seeing Darth Vader as simply another Imperial enemy, Han would eventually learn that this is his lover's father, a man whose redemption might be possible, but whose current actions continue to cause enormous suffering. The tension between supporting Leia's hope for her father's salvation and his own direct experience of Vader's cruelty would create internal conflicts that would test Han's commitment to both Leia and the rebellion. Meanwhile, Luke's romantic development might proceed along entirely different lines. Without the central narrative role he held in the original timeline, his relationships could develop more naturally and with less cosmic weight. His connection to figures like Mara Jade, if she exists in this altered universe, might be based more on personal compatibility and shared values than on destiny and prophecy. The broader galactic community's reaction to the Skywalker twins' emergence would be complex and varied. Many worlds that suffered under Imperial rule would see them as symbols of hope and resistance, living proof that even the Empire's greatest weapons could be turned against it. But others would fear the return of Force users to positions of political power, remembering the Republic's fall and the Jedi's failure to prevent it. The question of how to integrate Force users into the post-Imperial government would become a central political issue. Leia's dual role as both political leader and Jedi would be unprecedented in galactic history, creating the need for entirely new frameworks for balancing mystical abilities with democratic governance. The new Republic would need to develop systems for preventing the concentration of power that led to the old Republic's corruption, while still utilizing the unique capabilities that Force users bring to leadership and conflict resolution. The restoration of the Jedi Order would proceed along very different lines with both Skywalker twins involved from the beginning. Instead of Luke struggling alone to rediscover lost Jedi traditions, the twins would work together to create a new kind of Jedi organization, one informed by the political realities of galactic governance and the practical needs of beings seeking freedom and justice. Their approach to Jedi training would likely be more inclusive and diverse than the Old Order's methods. Leia's political experience would inform a more democratic approach to Jedi governance, while Luke's spiritual inclinations would preserve the contemplative and philosophical aspects of Jedi tradition. Together, they could create an organization that avoids both the rigid hierarchy of the Old Order and the dangerous isolation that comes from separating Force users from the broader galactic community. The impact on the Empire's military capabilities would be severe as Vader's secret rebellion creates increasingly obvious effects. Key Imperial victories would become rarer, while Rebel successes would multiply beyond what their actual capabilities should allow. Eventually, even mid-level Imperial officers would begin to suspect that something is fundamentally wrong with their intelligence and operational security. This would create opportunities for ambitious Imperial officers to attempt coups or power grabs, seeing the apparent weakness in the Empire's command structure as a chance for advancement. The resulting internal conflicts would accelerate the Empire's collapse while also creating new threats and opportunities for both the Rebellion and the Skywalker family. Grand Admiral Thrawn, if he remains loyal to the Empire in this timeline, would represent a particular threat to Vader's secret activities. Thrawn's analytical abilities and strategic genius would make him capable of detecting the patterns in Imperial failures and tracing them back to their source. A confrontation between Thrawn and Vader, with the Admiral suspecting but not quite able to prove his superior's treachery, would create incredible dramatic tension and force Vader to use all of his cunning and political skills to maintain his cover. The final confrontation aboard the second Death Star would be fundamentally different in this timeline. Instead of Luke surrendering himself to Imperial forces in a desperate gambit to redeem his father, the attack on the battle station would be coordinated between the Rebel fleet, the ground assault team, and Vader's secret sabotage efforts from within the Imperial command structure. The throne room scene would feature not just Luke facing the Emperor, but both Skywalker twins working together to confront the Sith Lord who has manipulated their family and terrorized the galaxy. Palpatine's strategy for turning them to the dark side would need to be completely different, focusing on the philosophical differences between the siblings and their conflicting approaches to dealing with their father's crimes. The Emperor's ultimate defeat would come not from a single moment of sacrifice by Vader, but from the combined will of the entire Skywalker family, finally united against the darkness that has consumed their lives for so many years. Vader's redemption would be more complete and satisfying, having been earned through years of difficult choices and personal growth rather than a last-minute conversion. The post-Imperial galaxy would be fundamentally different with both Skywalker twins involved in its reconstruction from the beginning. Their combined political and mystical abilities would make them natural leaders of the new Republic, but also create new challenges about how to prevent the concentration of power that led to the old Republic's fall. This alternate timeline ultimately suggests that the galaxy's salvation depended not on any single hero, but on the power of family love to overcome even the deepest darkness. It shows us a Star Wars universe where redemption is a process rather than an event, where the Force works through gradual change rather than dramatic revelation, and where the strength of family bonds can reshape the destiny of entire civilizations. The legacy of this change would extend far beyond the original trilogy, creating a galaxy where the Jedi return as partners in democratic governance rather than separate guardians of peace, where the lessons of the Empire's rise are learned and applied to prevent future tyranny, and where the Skywalker family's story becomes one of healing and hope rather than tragedy and loss.